The most common problem I see with photographers using longer focal lengths is that they only use them to isolate their subjects, such as in this picture here, which I took on an engagement shoot. The problem with doing this is we often end up with blurred backgrounds and not much context. In my why 85mm is misunderstood video, I explained in detail why the background is really important when using longer focal lengths like this. But that video was why. This video is going to be how. I'm going to tell you how to include the backgrounds by giving you some simple compositional techniques that you can use in your photo shoots. And by the end of this video, I hope you'll be able to take a good variety of pictures with a longer focal length like the 85mm. And that should really boost your portfolio of work. All the compositional techniques that are available in photography generally apply to every focal length that's out there. However, there is a point to be made here that certain compositional techniques suit certain focal lengths better than others. And more specifically, certain compositional techniques really don't suit certain focal lengths. So what I've done here is I've picked out my 3 favorite compositional techniques with telephoto lenses that work really well on 85mm lenses. But you can apply this to all different focal lengths. Anyway, let's get started. Now, you have heard of leading lines, but what about practical leading lines? I tried to come up with a term that explained what I mean better. And I'm going to use a couple of pictures from just one photo shoot to explain this to you, because I think these pictures do it the most justice and explain it the best. This was an engagement shoot that I did in Spain. The couple are walking along the beach, and that looks very nice. It's a nice romantic moment between the couple. But what I'm using here is actually leading lines. If you look, I'm having them walk along the shoreline, but the way that I'm framing the shot is so that the way the waves are breaking and the shoreline itself is creating a sweeping diagonal from left to right through the picture, leading us to our couple. This is an example of a practical leading line. And this differentiates itself in that the people that are in your picture or your subject is actively using the thing that is the leading line in your picture. There's a big difference because often what we'll do in pictures when we're using leading lines is using stuff like walls and railings and so on to lead towards our subject. But those aren't things that our subject are actually interacting with. The danger when using leading lines in general is that our viewer becomes very aware of them. It can feel a little bit distracting. So I think another takeaway moment from this is that leading lines don't have to be perfectly straight. I think there's almost a fixation on leading lines being very, very straight and very, very direct towards our subjects. We can use naturally occurring ones like footpaths, and I hope to demonstrate something a little bit more creative in thinking by using the shoreline like this. And this brings me on to the second point, which is partially linked to the first point. And that is about having a point of origin or destination in your picture. When we're using a longer focal length, our background can be nothing, or it could be a couple of things, but it's not often able to be much more than that. If we are to show our subjects, we're to move further back, but because we're on a longer focal length, we're still not getting much of the scene in. So we have to be much more selective about what is in our background, and we have to somehow try to make it make sense. This allows us to storytell with a longer focal length like this. You see in this picture that I did in this children's shoot, the children are outside reading a book together in the field as the sun goes down. It's more like a fairy tale type picture. But what I've very deliberately included in the background is a point of origin. The house becomes a visual anchor point for where the children are and why they are there. We don't see the whole house, we only see a bit of it, but we also see a little faint line of the path of which they've walked down to get to the place that they're at right now. And that in itself becomes a minor leading line as well. And it's another example of a practical leading line, even though it doesn't flow in the traditional way of diagonals and so on that we see in pictures. It's just there and there's a hint of it and we can see it, but it leads us to the other objects in the picture. Here's another picture from the same location, but with a different child in a different shoot that I did. Doing the same thing, it's showing the child playing outside, running around having fun in nature, exploring stuff like maybe you did when you were a child as well, trying to evoke these childhood memories. If I just zoomed in and just showed this moment, it would still be powerful, right? It would still work. But including the point of origin where the child has come from helps us tell the story all the better. We have a point of origin and a bit of a leading line. So what I'm trying to show you is we can combine certain elements here. So far we have covered practical leading lines, and we have covered a point of origin or a destination in the background. This helps tie our subjects to the environment because remember, when we're using these focal lengths, it's very easy to just have nothing backgrounds. So we can add something meaningful by using these practical leading lines or points of origin. But the third compositional element that I want to bring to you is perhaps the simplest of all, but it also is one of the most practical and easy to use ones as well. Because sometimes framing a point of origin isn't that easy. Sometimes finding that leading line that's practical and looks like it fits into the scene isn't easy. Well, one thing we can do in most locations is embed our couple into the scene by finding a visual anchor point. This is practical in almost all situations. So this is a technique you can almost always use. So when we're in our location, what we want to find is visual stopping points. These can be fence posts, gates, buildings, different structures. These are the sort of places where you would stop naturally. We can use them to put the people next to them, or we can use them as framing elements as well. But what this does is it gives us context, because when we add visual information, such as here is a fence, here is a gatepost, here is an archway, anything like that, it routes our subject to the location that they're in. And this is really helpful visually for our viewers because it gives us context. Again, that's what we're always looking for at these longer focal lengths. So you see in this picture here, I stopped the couple next to this column because it gives us this anchor point. It's the kind of place where people might naturally stop. And at this moment, I use the natural frame in the archway here that helps fix them visually into the scene. And again, in this picture, this concrete structure here, this place means something to the couple so they can see it here properly. And I'm using it as a framing element as well. This is embedding them into that landscape. And again, here with this couple, you're seeing the fence post in the background. This is absolutely critical because it creates that visual anchor again. It's this stopping point. These are the places where humans, people stop naturally. They look for things that are like full stops in nature. So we've got this fence railing that's by this field. And then where this wooden post is, I've put them by that because that feels natural. And this is how we embed our subjects into the scenery and the landscape that is around us. So what I want to make you aware of with all of these techniques is that I'm looking all the time to try to find things that are natural, naturally occurring, that aren't screamingly obvious all the time. This means the pictures feel more natural, but you could see all of these as visual anchor points, right? They walk along the shoreline as if they're anchored to it. The house in the background, they are anchored to it at a distance, but they're tied to that building. When I stop the couple by the fence post, they are anchored to it. These are visual reference points that place the subject in the landscape. It's storytelling, it's context. And as I said before, you can apply this to all focal lengths, but I think this is really, really good if you can do it with the 85mm or these longer telephoto focal lengths. If you like the way these pictures look, that's why they look like this. The other reason they look like this is because of the way that I've edited them as well. I have an editing workshop for outdoor portrait photography where I teach you all of my editing techniques. I take you through step by step. You can watch it as many times as you like, and by taking these techniques on board, create your own vision. Editing is so important. It's one of the pillars of photography, whether it's darkroom or Lightroom. It is critical that you learn how to do this if you want to create your own style and make your work stand out. And you do that by learning techniques from other photographers. If you like the way my work looks, check out the links in the description down below and check out my online workshops. And I will see you guys again in the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.